Just think about your own life right now and just think, what am I lying about? Who are you fooling? Who have you cheated? Who have you lied to? Just think about the deception that's in your life right now. Today we're going to talk about hypocrisy. And this is such a huge topic. This is so important because, you guys, when you think about the life of Jesus, you think about all the people he loved, right? You think about how he just cared for the sick, the needy, everyone. And you remember how he even loved like the grossest of people in the world's eyes. You know, whether they were, prostitutes or thieves or murderers, rapists, whatever. Jesus embraced them. He loved them. But there was one group of people that when he got in front of them, he would act completely different. And he would be so direct with them. And it wasn't this loving, gentle tone, but he would get in their face. And that was the hypocrites. The Pharisees, he would call them names. He'd call them things like, you sons of hell, you whitewashed tombs. And you're like, wow, Jesus. Jesus would say those things. Why? Because these people so disgusted him with their acts. Because why? They claimed to be religious. They claimed to have this godly relationship with him. And they claimed to be so pure. And everyone looked up to them as religious leaders. Yet Jesus looked inside their lives and said, you guys are so fake. You're hypocrites. And so when I look at Scripture, I look at the New Testament, I go, well, Jesus embraced everyone except for them. And he gets in their faces. That tells me if there's one thing in my life I don't want to be, it's a hypocrite. The tough thing about that statement is I fight it every day. Hypocrisy is so easy to fall into. And especially for those of you who have been in church for a while, if you've been in church for 5, 10 years or more, then pay special attention today. Because we are the ones that know how to fake it. We know all the lingo. We know all the words. We know how to carry ourselves to make ourselves look so Christian and so pure, like everything's going so well in our lives. And it's so easy for hypocrisy to sink into our lives. So don't just sit here and assume and go, well, I'm not a hypocrite. No, look at your life. Because this is something that can just get into us so quickly. See, the word hypocrite, it was the word they would use for an actor. Back then when they would put those masks on, and that was their character. They walk around with the mask, and you never know who they really were. They just had that mask on. Those people were called hypocrites. It wasn't like a bad term. It just meant you're an actor. You put a mask on. And that's exactly what people do in the church. We put on a mask. We disguise who we are. If I put on a mask, and let's say I preached my sermon with a mask on. And let's say that I gave the rest of my message like this, and just say, hey guys, turn to Luke chapter 11 right now. And, we get in the book of Luke, and I can tell you all sorts of things. No matter what's going on behind this mask, when you leave here today, you're going to think, man, he was in a good mood. I could even right now just totally pour my heart out and go, man, you guys, I had the toughest week. It's just killing me. I just got to pour. It just looks ridiculous. That's what a mask does. It hides. It hides who you really are. It hides, what's really going on inside. And that's exactly what people are doing in churches all across America today. They walk in the church and they fake. They pretend they're something they are not. And man, and yet you see how explosive, how livid Jesus is when he speaks to these types of people. And so it's got to be a warning to us. It's got to make us think, I better not become a person like that. See, in Luke chapter 11, verse 37, and you recall Jesus has been confronting these Pharisees on all sorts of sin, but here's where he really lets them have it. Luke chapter 11, verse 37, it says, when Jesus had finished speaking, a Pharisee invited him to eat with him. So he went in and reclined at the table. But the Pharisee, noticing that Jesus did not first wash before the meal, was surprised. And the Lord said to him, now then, you Pharisees, you clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you're full of greed and wickedness. You foolish people, did not the one who made the outside make the inside also? But give what is inside to the poor, and everything will be clean for you. So here it is. Okay, Jesus gives his message, and then a Pharisee invites him over to dinner. Okay, fair enough. He goes to dinner at this Pharisee's house, and it seems like there's a group of Pharisees that are all going to dine there with Jesus. But what Jesus does is when he walks in, he doesn't go through their cleansing ritual that the Pharisees had put together. And so the Pharisees are taken back by that. They're surprised, the Bible says. It's like, wow, why didn't he cleanse himself? Now, first of all, understand that this was not an Old Testament law, that you had to cleanse yourself before the meal. This was a law that the Pharisees made. Remember we talked about that a couple of weeks ago? How the Pharisees, because they didn't want to be influenced by the Hellenistic culture, they wanted to be separatists. They wanted to separate themselves, which was wonderful. But in so doing, they added all of these laws and really made themselves separate. And said, look, we don't even do this. We even wash before we eat. We do this. And they made these law, and these are things that were not in Scripture. So Jesus wasn't bound to them. This was a law the Pharisees made, and yet they expected him to follow it. Now, Jesus, not only does he not follow the law, but when he sees that they're offended, he doesn't go back and go, oh, okay, you want me to wash? I'll go wash. No, he doesn't do that. In fact, he uses it as an opportunity to teach the Pharisees. He looks at them and he goes, you guys want me to wash, don't you? He goes, that's just like you Pharisees. You're concerned about washing the outside and looking so beautiful. Hey, look at me. I'm cleansing myself. Look, I'm sprinkling myself. Look, I'm clean. I'm doing this ritual. And he goes, but inside your heart, you're sick. You're full of greed, wickedness. He uses this and he goes, this is the perfect example of what you are. You cleanse the outside so everyone sees, but inside, I know what your hearts are like. I see the greed. I see the wickedness. And the analogy he uses, he says, you Pharisees, you clean the outside of the cup and dish. Let's say you go home today. You look on your kitchen counter. You see a cup of chocolate milk that's been sitting there all week. You think, oh, gross. So you run over to the sink and you wash the outside of it. Oh, okay. You pour some punch in there, and drink it with your lunch. I mean, it's just sick. It's just disgusting. It's like, who would do that? That's the analogy Jesus uses. He goes, that's what you Pharisees do. It's like you clean the outside of the dish, the part that really doesn't matter. And yet inside of you, you've got this greed and this wickedness. Outwardly, you may give money to the poor, but inside your heart, you don't love them. He goes, if you would give what is inside, if you gave your heart and actually love the poor, you know what? You're going to end up giving them to them anyways. But focus on what is inside rather than what is outside. And then Jesus just lays into them. One thing after another. And he uses this phrase, he uses this phrase 6 times. He says, woe to you. Now, you and I hear that and we think, big deal. But you got to understand the strength. I mean, it's not a term that we use. It's a cursing. When he says, woe to you, we just lost all concept of this phrase. It's not like you're driving down the freeway, someone cuts you off, woe to you! It doesn't sound right. It's just not our language. But if you understood what the word woe means, the word woe literally means to curse or to damn. It's the idea of to say, damned are you. Cursed are you by God. It was the strongest term he could have used. It carried with it this connotation of, like this cursing, this wrath is so bad upon you, it just causes you to go, whoa, woe to you. Oh, do I feel for you? Oh, do I feel sorry for you? Woe, are you cursed by God? So understand when he uses this term, this is heavy. And he says it to them 6 times for 6 different things that are going on in their lives. And there are 6 things that we need to evaluate to make sure that we're not becoming hypocrites like them. He says in verse 42, woe to you, Pharisees. Why? Because you give God 1/10 of your mint, rue, and all other kinds of garden herbs, but you neglect justice and the love of God. You should have practiced the latter without leaving the former undone. So the first thing he says, woe to you. Why? He goes, because you're giving 1/10 of all this stuff, but you're neglecting things that are far more important, like showing justice to the poor, loving the poor. See, what a Pharisee does is he obeys commands and he leaves his heart out of it. He obeys a bunch of rules, but he leaves his heart out of it. He doesn't love the people. And that's the thing you got to understand about what Jesus taught in the New Testament. God is not just concerned about you performing a bunch of actions. He is concerned about your heart and your motivation behind them. That's why Paul even says in 1 Corinthians 13, he goes, look, even if I give everything I possess to the poor, surrendered my body to the flames, it doesn't profit me anything. If I don't love them, it doesn't profit me anything. I've got to love. That's what Jesus taught. What were the greatest commandments? Love the Lord your God. Love your neighbor as yourself. Not just obey these laws, not just obey these rules. But these Pharisees, they obeyed the commands. In fact, he says, you tithe, even your mint, your rue, your garden herbs. What they were doing is they would take everything, because the Bible says, you give 10% of everything that comes in, you give 10% back to God. And so they were meticulous. It was to the point where, let's say you go home today, and someone gave you a container of oregano. And you go, oh, okay, it's a gift. Let me pour it out on my table and start separating. 1 for God, 9 for me. And you just separate all the flakes. And you come to church next week and you dump it in the offering. No, don't do that. But the whole point is you bring it before the church and go, look, everything I get, I always make sure I give God at least 1/10 of it. Here it is. That's what the Pharisees did. Now, did Jesus tell them not to do that? No. In fact, he says, you know what? You should have done the latter without neglecting the former. He's telling them, I don't want you to stop giving 1/10 to the poor. I just want you to give them things that are even more important than your money. Give them justice. Give them love. Those are two things they're not getting. See, why were the poor not getting justice? Because they were looked down upon. They were looked down upon because it's very similar to some churches today where they teach, if God really loved you, if you were right with God, He would give you so much wealth, such great health, all this stuff, health, wealth, prosperity is yours if you are right with God. And so what do they do? And when they see poor people, what do they assume? You're not right with God. You're in sin. Something's wrong with you. And so these people were looked down upon because of the status of their wealth, assuming that, well, they must not be blessed by God, so they didn't get the same rights as the rich and the prestigious. They didn't get the same love. And Jesus says, again, if you love them, if you gave them what's inside, the outside's going to come. The outside will come clean. You see, it's not enough for you to come to church and give 10% of your income. That's great. But the issue is your heart behind it. We don't want to just pass a plate and you, out of ritual or to make yourself feel self-righteous, you put some money in it. God's desire is that you would actually love the people it's going to go to. That you would actually love the poor. That you would actually love the people in the area that we could use the money to minister to them. See, that's God's desire, is that we don't just obey rules and leave our heart out of it, because that's what Pharisees do. Next, in verse 43, he says, woe to you, Pharisees, because you love the most important seats in the synagogues and greetings in the marketplaces. Okay, look at that verse. Does that seem that bad? You love the most important seats in the synagogues. You like those seats of prestige where everyone looks up and goes, no way, he's in that position. Let's be honest. We struggle with that. I mean, a lot of us struggle with that. We like to be respected. We like people to look up to us. And yet the Bible says that's part of hypocrisy, is loving that. You don't love other people, but you love... that's what he's telling these Pharisees. You don't love the poor, but you love your prestige. You love when people look up to you. Do you love that? I mean, really evaluate your life, because if you love prestige, then you'll start to do whatever it takes to get it. Even if it means being fake, lying so that people look up to you. Part of the reason why the Pharisees didn't want to follow Jesus was because they knew if they followed Jesus, Jesus is getting all the attention. He's getting all the glory. And so if we follow Him, we've got to give all our attention to Him. And they didn't want to let go of their own prestige, their own success. They wanted to be looked up to. But following Jesus means, no, you know what? I say I am nothing. I am nothing without Him. It's all about Him. All the glory goes to Him. But a hypocrite is one who wants that glory for himself and tries to take it for himself rather than giving it to God. Verse 44, he says, woe to you, because you're like unmarked graves, which men walk over without knowing it. He says to these Pharisees, he goes, you guys are like unmarked graves. Now understand, back then they would mark the graves very clearly. Why? Because, I keep talking to myself today, why? But the reason is because back then, like in Numbers, it talks about how if you were to come in contact with a dead body, you would defile yourself. You become unclean, and you have to go through these different rituals, these ceremonies to cleanse yourself before going to the temple, before worshiping God. And so what they would do is they would mark out the graves very clearly because you don't want to walk on them, because that would instantly defile you. But he says to the Pharisees, he goes, you guys are like graves that are unmarked. That means you look just like the rest of the land, but the truth is there's a dead body under there, just no one knows it. And they'd walk right over you, and they'd get all defiled and not even realize it. And he says, Pharisees, that's the way you are. See, you look all holy, you look all spiritual, but people come in contact with you and they actually get defiled without knowing it. You're actually a negative influence on them. See, if you want to become a hypocrite, the third thing is you got to learn to look better than you really are. Just make yourself look more spiritual than you really are. That's what the Pharisees love to do. They'd wear these long robes. I mean, if I walked up here, a nice flowing robe, I mean, you guys would just laugh at me. But if I went to a crowd that didn't know me, okay, and I'm wearing this gown and up there and, blessing you all, you would just immediately think, wow, there's a holy man. There's a man of God. When in reality, no, it's just a guy in a robe. See, but it's the appearance, and it's like, well, you know what? Whoever wears a robe, you can make them, and that's what the Pharisees do. That's why Jesus attacks them in Matthew when he talks about how, wow, you just love your long robes, you love, putting these things on your head, all decorated, that make you look spiritual on the outside. But in reality, you're dead inside. I've got a cake up here. Anyone hungry? It's about lunchtime. Now, several people came, saw the cake today, and they go, ooh, can I have a bite? And I'm like, yeah, you can have a piece afterwards. This cake, underneath the frosting, is just a pile of manure. I don't normally make cakes like this. This is just an illustration, okay? I just went to the Do-It Center and got a bag of manure and just made a little mold for it, and then we put frosting over it, and it looks beautiful. So you probably don't want to bite. But this is exactly the type of people that attend churches all across America today, where there will be people who just hide who they really are. Just throw a layer of frosting on top of themselves. Some of you, this cake, this is exactly what you are, and you know it. You look just like everyone else in the room, but you know what really went on this week in your life. And you know what's really going on in your life, and it's been going on in your life. You can fake a relationship with God. You can raise your hands during worship. You can sing with all of your heart. You can teach Sunday school. You can do that. Throw another layer of frosting on. But deep down inside, you're full of it. You are. And people have told me that before. I used to come to church. I'd be hungover. No one would know. I came to church, after a whole week of staring at pornography. I was having an affair. I was doing this, doing that. I was stealing in my business. I was all these things, just full of hatred, bitterness toward all these people. But you know what? I just put a layer of frosting on. I just hid it. I came in. I looked like everyone else. And the truth is I don't know who this is. You do. God knows. And I just want you to think about something, though. What's the point? Especially if you say you believe in a God. What's the point? Let's take this to the end. What are you going to do? Because it's not that hard to lie. It's not that hard to lie. We can be fake. It's simple. People want to believe the best in you, so we can lie. But what are you going to do? You're going to fool everyone in this room, okay? We're all going to believe your stories. We're all going to talk about how spiritual you are. Then one day you die, and we'll have a great memorial service in here for you. Man, people will come up, they'll come to the microphone and go, oh, I remember him, he taught my kids in Sunday school, or she helped me with this or that. We'll say all these wonderful things. We'll tell, show little pictures of you as you grew up, and oh, isn't that cute? And then we're going to talk about, and what, and guess what? He or she's in heaven right now, in the presence of God. We saw it, we knew it, everything we know about him shows that he's up there. Meanwhile, you're in hell. But you fooled us. And you can look up and go, I totally fooled them. That's the goal of your life? That's what you're trying to do? Let me ask you something. How long is that going to bring you fulfillment down there? Knowing that you fooled us all here on the earth. Yeah, but they had respect for me when I was up there. How long do you think that joy is going to last? 5 seconds? 5 minutes? 5 million years? You see, what's the point? I want you to, take this hypocrisy and the lying to the very end. And go, what is the point of deception? Do you not believe that one day you're going to come before a holy God that's really going to expose everything that you are? Well, Jesus goes on in verse 45, and I love what happens here. Verse 45, this is hilarious. One of the experts in the law, okay, so an expert in law was like a higher echelon Pharisee, because he was an expert in the law and he was a Pharisee. One of the experts in the law answered him, "Teacher, when you say these things, you insult us also." Okay? This guy, he thinks that, he thinks Jesus cares. He stands up and he goes, whoa, wait a second. You're saying Pharisees. Do you understand that includes us? And that when you say Pharisees, you're insulting us? And Jesus doesn't backpedal and go, ooh, I didn't mean to offend you. In fact, he points him out. He goes, good. I'm glad you're standing. Let me tell you about yourself. In the next verse, he says, verse 46, you experts in the law, woe to you. Because you load people down with burdens they can hardly carry, and you yourselves will not lift one finger to help them. He says to the experts in law, he goes, you know what? You want to talk about cursing. You want to talk about insulting. He says, woe to you. Why? Because you're the ones that made up all these little laws. And you're telling all these people, oh, you got to live by all these laws we made up when you don't. That's what a hypocrite does. You expect of other people what you won't do yourself. You're not being an example to them. You're not living these things up and helping them and saying, wow, watch how I live. There's none of that. You just put all these expectations on people and you don't do it yourself. That is a hypocrite. You expect of others what you yourself are not willing to do. Parents are notorious for this. You need to do this. I know mom and dad don't do this, but you need to do this. This is good for you. This is the way you should live. Let me say something here. I'm a pretty simple guy, okay? I don't claim to be an expert in a whole lot of things. People don't call me for wisdom in all these different areas of life. But if there were one area in my life that I could say I have some sort of expertise in, I would say it's in the area of understanding youth, especially high school students, teenagers. And I say that because this is what I do. This is what I've been doing for the last 15 years or so, is talking with high school students. Tomorrow morning I get on a plane, fly across the country, speak to 3,000 high schoolers, come back for a week, fly back out somewhere else, speak to another few thousand high schoolers. And afterwards, after I talk, they just sit down and we just talk. And we just talk, sometimes to all hours of the night. What's going on in your life? What's going on in your life? And I feel like, man, I hear a lot of the same stories. And I start to understand where they're coming from. And the one thing I understand about the teens is, man, parents have such a huge, huge effect on their lives. They are still by far the number one influence in their lives. Good or bad, they're the number one influence. And the thing I can tell you about high school students is it's pretty hard to lie to them if you live with them. You may think you're fooling them, but they know what goes on in your life. They know if you really love God. See, they can see if you're just acting one way at home and then your Christian friends come over, they see it. I may have kids talk about that all the time. They just go, my parents go to church, and this is the way they are when, their Christian friends aren't around and they go to church and they're different. You see, your kids see you when all the layers of frosting are off. And so many of them, look at that cake with the, frosting and they just go, Why would I want to be that? Why would I want to be like my mom? Why would I want to be like my dad? I know what they really are. God hasn't done anything for them. It's just a show. And you may think that you're hiding things from your kids, but I think you'd be surprised. Just because they don't call you on it or confront you on it or tell you that they know, you'd be surprised what they know about who you are and how you live. And I say that because I spend so much time trying to undo things. Say, well, yeah, I know that's what your parents did, but God is still real. The truth is how you live is going to impact. It's not just about you. Hypocrisy is not just about you. It affects those around you. Live the life. Change. See, some of you, maybe you've been living that life. And you know what would be awesome? Because this has happened too. Is somewhere along the line, you switch. At some point you go, yes, I've been living a lie, and now I'm going to change. God, come into my life. Yeah, I'm not going to throw more frosting on. Look, here's who I am. Change me from the inside out. And I've seen parents and people in the middle of their life just change. People at the end of their lives just change and become this new person. The kids look on and go, whoa, what happened to mom? What happened to dad? And mom and dad can say, you know what, I got serious about Jesus. And the kids can go, okay, that's what I want too then. Because they see it. Is your life one that they would want to model? It goes on in verse 47. Woe to you! You build tombs for the prophets, and it was your forefathers who killed them. So you testify that you approve of what your forefathers did. They killed the prophets, and you build their tombs. Because of this, God in his wisdom said, I'll send them prophets and apostles, some of whom they will kill, and others they will persecute. Therefore, this generation will be held responsible for the blood of all the prophets that has been shed since the beginning of the world, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who was killed between the altar and the sanctuary. Yes, I tell you, this generation will be held responsible for it all. Okay, that's kind of a strange phrase here. Imagine you're at dinner with Jesus, and suddenly, at the end of the dinner, he goes, and you know what? You know who's guilty for killing Abel? You know who's going to get punished for that? I mean, Abel, that's Adam and Eve's kid. He looks at them and says, you. I'm going to hold you responsible for killing him. I mean, imagine you're thinking, Jesus, that was thousands of years ago. I wasn't even alive. You're going to say I'm guilty for that? And for every prophet that ever killed, you're going to hold me responsible for that? I mean, they would immediately say, wait a second, there's no way. That was our forefathers, and we hate what they did. And Jesus' point is, you don't hate what they did. He goes, it's like teamwork. They kill them, you bury them. They killed the prophets, you build their tombs. Why would he say that? What Jesus was saying was, if those people were alive today, you'd kill them also. Because you hate their message just like your forefathers hated their message. The Pharisees would never say that. They said, no, we love the prophets, we adore the prophets. But the point was, they didn't obey the prophets. They didn't obey their message. They didn't tolerate their message. Why? What happened to Jesus? He gets killed by these people. Why? Because they don't tolerate his message. And Jesus is saying, look, it's the same thing. See, you can leave here and say, oh, you know what? I love the message. I love the Word of God. But the point is do you really obey it? Because what a hypocrite does is he speaks highly of the Bible. He speaks about its wonderful teachings. He loves listening to its teachings. He just doesn't obey the teachings. And that's exactly what the Pharisees did. They said, oh, we love the prophets. And Jesus says, no, you didn't. If they were alive, you'd kill them. So you got to understand, people will say today who reject what Jesus taught, they say, well, I don't believe in what he taught, but I disagree with them killing him. The truth is, no, you don't. In fact, if Jesus were alive today, you would want him dead also. Those of you who reject his message today. You see, because think about it. If you had a man on this earth who claims to be the Son of God and just flat out tells it like it is, imagine this. And he just flat out says, I'm the Son of God, follow me. Everyone following Islam, Muhammad was an absolute liar. He was. He's no prophet of God. All you Muslims, you're wrong. I'm the only way to heaven. He starts naming all the cults. Starts talking about Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, just goes on down the line. And he just says, look, none of you guys are going to make it unless you turn and you truly put your trust in me and me alone. You really think a guy like that's going to be real popular? Or do you think all these people would want him dead? They'd want him dead. Goes on, last thing, and here's the ultimate, okay? And we'll close with this. Verse 52. Woe to you, experts in the law, because you have taken away the key to knowledge. You yourselves have not entered, and you have hindered those who were entering. Okay? This is the ultimate in hypocrisy. This is the worst thing you can do. The last woe is this. He says, you guys, you're taking knowledge away from the people. See, you yourself, he says, you're not entering. What's he talking about? He's talking about heaven. He's talking about the truth. You're not entering, and you're hindering others from entering. See, the worst thing you can do as a hypocrite is go the wrong direction and lead others with you. Get them to follow. See, that's the worst. That's why Jesus was so livid against these people, was they were supposed to be the religious leaders, and they're actually taking knowledge away from people and leading them down a path that was not heading to heaven. That's why he says in Matthew, he says, you know what, woe to you Pharisees. He goes, because you travel around the world seeking to find someone to convert, but once he's converted, you make him twice as much a son of hell as yourself. See, the worst thing you can do when you're heading the wrong direction is lead other people with you. And people in the church do this. You get into your sin, and you get confronted on, and what you do is you start justifying it. Well, it's not that bad, and you start to get other people on your side. And pretty soon you start having these rallies, and all these people, well, it's not so bad. This sin's not, you're taking them down a path that goes against God's word. See, but it makes us feel better when other people are in our sin or agree with us. What's Satan doing right now? He's going to go to hell, right? It's not there yet, but he's going to go. So in the meantime, what does he do? He tries to take as many people with him as he can. It's a horrible, wicked thing to do. And you understand that as human beings, we can do the same thing. Start heading away from God and taking other people with us. After he says all that, it says in verse 53, when Jesus left there, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law began to oppose him fiercely and to besiege him with questions, waiting to catch him in something he might say. Okay, so that's probably no surprise. I don't know if you realize this, but when Jesus left the house, they didn't all go, hey, let's do this every week. Okay? No, he didn't make any friends. He left there, and the people were just angry with him, and they're waiting to catch him. And listen, I know this isn't a real feel-good message that I came to preach today, and I wasn't expecting to make a lot of friends. Came here with a message of Jesus, that some of you are absolute liars. You're totally fake. You show up, you look like everyone else. But the truth is you know what went on this week. And you know what goes on in your life. That God really hasn't come into your life. He hasn't changed you from the inside out. You just keep putting more and more layers of frosting. And I don't know about it. No one knows about it. Maybe your family. Maybe your neighbors. But the point is you're a liar. And I want you to recognize a couple things about that. One is it's stupid. Because where's it going to get you in the end? And the other thing is it's evil. Because you end up taking other people down this path. And it's not just about you. You're bringing other people down with you. Hypocrisy is stupid and it's evil. That's exactly the way some of you are living right now. Every year, people get exposed for who they really are. Having said that, let me just say this. I know what it is to be a hypocrite. I was working in a church where I was able to fake it. Living a certain type of life, and yet faking it when I was in front of people. And it was terrible. I never had peace. Ended up destroying myself and destroying those around me. And really harming them. And I say that obviously, not proud of it. But I say that because I want you to understand that if anyone comes clean and says, look, I've been living a lie, that I'm the last person that's going to judge you. Because I know what it is to be fake, and I don't ever want to go back there, but I know how tempting it is to lie and pretend something's not there. And I know how good it feels to finally just say, all the frosting's off. Here I am. This is what I really am. God, change me. You guys remember 2 years ago when I came back from Colorado after speaking at a youth camp? And I talked to you about how I talked about hypocrisy, and then afterwards I did something just totally strange. I just said, you know what? I have a microphone up here. Anyone that wants to come up and just share your hypocrisy, you're welcome to come up. And high school students came up and just said, yeah, I've been lying about this. I've been fake about this. And I told you about that one kid. I don't know if any of you remember. Senior in high school gets up, gets on the microphone, and he just says, it's a football player, senior in high school, in front of 600 of his peers. He says, I've been lying. He goes, my freshman year, I was so into pornography, and yet I was teaching Bible study. None of you knew that. My sophomore year, I had a girlfriend, and I was sleeping with her. Meanwhile, I'm still a church leader, and I'm getting more involved in the youth group, leading more Bible studies. Last year, he just starts bawling his eyes out. So none of you know this, but I've been involved in homosexuality all year long. It's gotten so bad that I even tried to force my little brother into some acts with me. Meanwhile, you guys see me as a leader in the church. I'm holding this microphone, like shaking, just going, I can't believe this kid would come up here before his senior year in front of 600 of his peers and share this. And just said, this is who I really am. I will never forget that night. As every kid in that room just exposed their lives. Said, man, if he can say that in front of all of that, us, they got in their groups and just went for it. And revival took place there. People got so real, and I was just so pumped. I'd never seen anything like it. That kid blew my mind. What would cause a senior in high school to do that? He just wanted to be right before God above everything else on this earth. He was tired of being a hypocrite. And my prayer is that same type of revival would take place at Cornerstone. We've got a great reputation in the community. You know, Family Fest yesterday was just intense, incredible. But the truth is some of the people here are still hypocrites and are still causing people to turn away from God rather than turn to Him. And I would just love to see you just come clean and understand that God loves you. And God is waiting to just embrace you, and we are too. As we worship, there'll be some people up here in the prayer room, not to judge you or condemn you, but to pray for you. And during this singing time, it's supposed to be a time of worship. But for some of you, to sing isn't really going to be worshiping God. God would want you to worship Him just through your confession of what's really going on in your life. Some of you, maybe you've never really given your life to the Lord. Maybe everyone thinks that you have. But maybe today you recognize, yeah, God, I'm a sinner, and I need you so badly. I recognize Jesus died for all these sins, and I want Him in my life now. Only He can change you from the inside out. You can take all the frosting out, but you know what? It still consists of the same stuff until God changes you, comes into your life, and enables you to cleanse yourself. And maybe that's what you need to do, and you come up and you can get baptized today. You may not have been planning on it. Maybe you weren't planning on it, you just come up. It's no big deal. You get wet. You go home wet, and you remember it the rest of the day, and you remember the rest of your life. That was the day I turned it around. That was the day I was trapped in all this garbage. But I heard the Word of God, and I decided to change and give my life to the Lord. And you can get baptized today and say, you know what, I'm dying to my old self. I'm coming up, and I'm going to live a new life. And that would be so awesome. And the rejoicing that would take place here doesn't even compare to what would happen in heaven, as all the angels, the Bible says, would rejoice over your repentance.